this is Lee back once again for another video, and today I just wanted to discuss a topic that has kind of been, simmering around in my mind for quite some time, and, it shows up in, the topic of wrestling, but you could apply it to just about anything, these days. Specifically, I'm talking about brand loyalty and fans. Now, you could apply this to, political parties, you could apply it to video games, you could apply it to, just about anything. But specifically when it comes to wrestling, you think about wrestling brands. The WWE brand, is so huge. Vince McMahon and his World Wrestling Entertainment Company, has pretty much taken over all of wrestling, professional wrestling in the Western world. So when you think of wrestling, unless you're thinking about collegiate sport, you're thinking about the sports entertainment that, Raw, SmackDown, and so on. Of course, they own NXT, formerly Florida Championship Wrestling. But when it comes to this rant topic, I'm thinking of fans who, they'll say about a certain wrestler, oh, that wrestler, they're not very good, they're kind of terrible, or they're crap, they're garbage, they're a loser, they're worthless, they're etc., etc. But then as soon as that wrestler comes to WWE television, all of a sudden, they're great, they're amazing, they're such a great, a legend, an icon, a phenomenon. I just love them so much. What is it about this? It's like you get a wrestler, take Sting for example, and of course I'm sure that some of these people would deny ever saying this, but I remember people bad-mouthing Sting, saying how terrible he was when he was in TNA, even though he had a lot of good years there where he did different characters, he did different matches. Not all the angles were perfect or wonderful, but that was true of his time in WCW as well. But all of a sudden he comes to WWE, and people who would never give him the time of day or, outright hated him, all of a sudden love him. And when you think about it, what did he do in WWE? He lost 2 matches. That's pretty much all he did, and he was in a tag team match. He was injured. So why did people wait so long to suddenly say he was good? It's because brand loyalty. People are fans. They're fans, yes, fans of Sting, but their loyalty to the brand, the WWE brand, comes first. And this really rubs me the wrong way, because why should it matter what company logo is above his head? He's the same Sting. Steve Borden, he has the same characters, the same wrestling abilities, the same entertainment value. And yet, just because he's on a different television show, all of a sudden, he's good or bad. Why not be a fan of Sting rather than of the WWE brand? Take another example, AJ Styles. People badmouthed him when he was in TNA, even though almost his entire career was there. Yes, he wrestled in Ring of Honor. Yes, he appeared briefly in WWF, I believe it was. I don't remember if he appeared in WCW, but, if he did, it would have been very, very briefly. But he did so much in TNA. 99% of his career was there, and yet people paid him no mind. And all of a sudden he came to WWE and did pretty much the same thing. Of course, he's towards the end of his career. I mean, all of these wrestlers that have never been in WWE, or have left it for a long time and then come back, all of a sudden, they can do maybe, a 2/3 to 1/3 of what they used to be able to do, because they're aging and have been injured, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, they're great, they're wonderful. So AJ Styles, all you people that say you love him now, where were you when he was in TNA doing some of his best work in the X division? Now, I'm not saying that as kind of a jaded fanboy. I mean, there is the type of fan who likes something until it becomes mainstream, and then they hate it because they say, well, you sold out, when you were small time, when, only, myself and a few close friends knew who you were. It was good, but now that everyone likes it, I don't like it. But that's not the case here. AJ Styles was given so much flack by so many fans, bashed by so many wrestling fans until he came to WWE, and then all of a sudden people said that he was great. But think about it. Why did he come to WWE? Why did WWE want him? Why were they willing to pay him more than TNA? It's because obviously they thought he was a good wrestler. They thought he was a good character. They thought that he could draw money, as Harley Race would say. And so clearly there was some talent, there was some, something good there. If, they didn't become this great company just by being stupid all the time. Sure, they made a lot of mistakes, but they recognized talent when they see it. Yes, there's all this backstage politics. Sometimes I think the wrestling industry is less like, tough macho guys and more like a, drama school, backstabbing, prima donnas. But, really, AJ Styles, the same guy. He's in TNA, he's in Ring of Honor, he's terrible, he's nobody, he's a loser, he doesn't count. He's in WWE, same person. He's amazing. I don't understand. Why not just say AJ Styles is great? Or think about Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy was in WWF, WWE for a long, long time from the Attitude Era. He was loved because he had many substance abuse problems, many drug problems. He went to TNA, was pretty much the same guy. Yes, he had a couple of incidents, embarrassing behavior because he was intoxicated in the ring, and he ended up being kicked out a couple of times. But the thing is, he was pretty much the same person. If anything, his character grew and he did more. By the time he was in TNA, he was at the top of his game, and yet no one cared. Everyone just said, Jeff Hardy, what a loser. Who cares? But if he were to come back to WWE, mark my words, he would be praised, he would be honored, he would be called a legend. WWE themselves have done this to certain wrestlers. Think about the Ultimate Warrior. He left the business years and years ago, after the 90s, and then I think it's because he went on those speaking tours and he became kind of a right-wing, a political speaker for a brief period, and got all these college students to hate him because he wasn't as progressive or liberal or whatever. And I have a feeling that WWE was embarrassed, and so they at about the same time they released this video called "The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior," where they basically bashed him. Of course, later it came out, the story was that originally they were going to do this DVD honoring him, but he didn't want to participate. He still was kind of bitter or had some grievances because he felt that they mistreated him back in the day. And of course, he blames it all on Hulk Hogan, and they had their feud, behind the scenes, who deserved more time and talent and money. And so they basically turned against him, and they turned it into a hit piece. Instead of honoring him, they made fun of him. And of course, I remember when this video came out, I watched it, and it was ridiculous because the things that they said about him were silly. I mean, they made fun of his appearance, but they were the ones that chose him. They were the ones that promoted his appearance. They were the ones that, imitated his behavior. If they made fun of his, promos and how he would act crazy, but, they didn't make fun of Hulk Hogan, and he did pretty much the same thing, and Randy Savage the same way, and, his name. I mean, they had goofier characters. They even copied him after he left, and so it's just very hypocritical of the WWE to do this. And yet, you can see they did it because, they figure, well, if you're not on our side, then we have no time for you. But secretly, we want to bring you back. So, eventually he mended fences with the WWE, and they brought him into the Hall of Fame, and he kind of forgave everybody, and they forgave him, and, then he died tragically, mysteriously. I mean, probably his health, had been damaged from years of, performance-enhancing drugs and other things, and stress. But at that point, they released a new DVD set honoring him. But I mean, that was WWE. But you can imagine at the same time, WWE promotes this idea, I think behind the scenes, and fans buy into it, which is that if you're not part of our product, you don't count in the wrestling world. You're not good enough. But if you are part of our, if you are in our good graces, if you are on our show, then you're good. Think about Chyna. I hadn't talked about her, this great woman wrestler. And, most of her popularity, I think, was due to her look. I mean, I hate to say it, but it looks like she obviously used a lot of steroids and, growth hormones and other drugs to achieve this very bulked look, which really, you think about it, that was pretty much the norm through the WWE's, heyday. As these giant, roided up, guys, these bodybuilder looks. So you had a woman that did this, and she was like the only one. All the other women, that they chose, the divas, they all looked like models through the, late 90s, early 2000s. And yet Chyna was the exception. She wrestled men and all this stuff. But then she left, and it was because, she had been in a relationship with Triple H, who basically left her for the boss's daughter. He married Stephanie McMahon and became the second in command of the company. And, obviously there was politics involved with Chyna, and she kind of went on a downward spiral. She was into all these other drugs, and she had all these problems, and, she had this abusive relationship, which apparently a lot of it was on her. She was the abuser with X-Pac, and, it was just very embarrassing for WWE. So I don't blame them for kind of distancing themselves from her. And yet at the same time, there was a time when they promoted, women that were on their roster. They would sell, these, racy, photo shoots of, women in their division. It was all about sex appeal and not wrestling ability. But then they tried to, become a publicly traded company and clean up their image. I'm getting kind of off track, but the whole brand loyalty thing, the WWE sells a certain image. This is how we want our fans to view our company. We want to view it as, quality, family, friendly entertainment. And yet at the 90s, they wanted to be seen as edgy and, like trash TV, reality TV, too hot for TV, R-rated, kind of thing. You know, um, all about sex and violence and shocking, shock value. And that was pretty much the Monday Night Wars. WCW did about the same thing about that time. But they've tried to clean up their act. And so now it's like all these former wrestlers, if they're not part of WWE, it's like they don't want anything to do with them. And yet secretly behind the scenes, they're kind of trying to bring those people in and say, well, what do we have to do to, bring you in and get you into the Hall of Fame? And if you'll play ball with us, we'll treat you right, and then the fans will automatically like you. So I kind of dislike the way they sort of manipulate fans. Um, why can't we just say these wrestlers matter for who they are? They're hardworking people, most of them. You know, and they do what they can, and they get injured. They get into drug addiction, and it's kind of sad. And yes, they have at times reached out to certain people to try to help them. But I just hate the way the fans kind of just assume that unless they are, in the good graces of the WWE, they just don't. I can imagine, I can mark my words, if Jeff Hardy comes back to the WWE, all the fans that bashed him will suddenly say he's good. Same thing with Kurt Angle. They've been talking about him coming back. It's just happened so much. Think about Samoa Joe. Nobody cared about Samoa Joe until he came to NXT, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, he's great, he's great. And yet they treat him like a rookie. They treat him like, oh, he needs to prove himself. He's been wrestling for how many years? Decades. He doesn't need to prove himself. He's already good. And frankly, the NXT show, I think, improves because they take more risks. They bring in more independent talent. And I think that's what they need to do. But really, if you watch NXT, and I have watched it, and I've seen these wrestlers, and I've thought, they did a pretty good job. But when I think of the work that they've done in Ring of Honor, or in Japan, or in TNA, or, in other places, Shimmer, you think of Asuka. If you like her matches in NXT, her matches are like 100 times better in other promotions before this, when she was Kana. Of course, her name Kanako. But anyway, so it's just all a matter of perspective. I think 90% of wrestling fans or more in the Western world, they only know the WWE. They only know what's on television, and so they don't understand. They just assume whatever they're given is all there is, and whatever WWE says is the gospel truth. It's the end. It's the bottom line. And in that sense, they are marks. You know, a mark is someone who thinks it's all real. And the marks, they don't question what the company says. Um, so I'm not saying that the company, is automatically wrong, but take what they say with a grain of salt if you're a fan. And just feel free to enjoy the wrestlers you enjoy. Why not just enjoy them wherever? I mean, yes, it's true. Certain wrestlers, they'll go to certain promotions and they'll be just treated badly and not paid enough, or they'll be given a stupid character and a storyline that just doesn't go anywhere. That happens. AJ Styles had some bad storylines in TNA, but he also had some good ones. And he wasn't that great on the mic, but no one could doubt he was a great wrestler, and that's why WWE wanted him. So anyway, I've gone on, but the brand loyalty is just so annoying. Um, you could apply it to other things. You could say, well, uh, oh, I won't even go there, but just think of your favorite franchise or character, and maybe one time, one company or movie director has in charge of it, and people are bashing it, and then all of a sudden it goes to another location, and the product itself doesn't really change much, but all of a sudden people say it's great. What is that? That's brand loyalty. That's a blindness that people have. I say just like the person or the character or the product for what it is, not for who's promoting it, not for what brand is stamped on top of it. You know. So I'm glad that these wrestlers, are now getting the recognition they deserve. But come on, look at their old work. It was always good. And that's the funny thing too. I mean, if someday WWE has buys out TNA and puts all of the Sting and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe matches on their network, all of a sudden people will say it's great. I mean, WWE has been bashing WCW for years, and yet now they own all their footage, so now they're promoting those WCW matches. Wait a minute, I thought you said it was all garbage. I thought you said it was all second rate. And yet now you're profiting from it. Oh, now it's good. So, I, I think it's rather silly. But, I've said enough. So there you go, brand loyalty, boo! Fandom, true fandom, not fanboyishness, but fandom, true fandom. Okay, so anyway,